Well, pro-abortion protests are expected tonight in many cities across Italy. This after the country appears set for a new prime minister whose platform is God, Homeland, and traditional family. Giorgia Meloni's party, the Brothers of Italy, was the big winner in Sunday's election. Opponents say if she becomes prime minister, she will target abortion, which is legal in Italy in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. However, medical personnel are allowed to opt out of performing an abortion if it violates their conscience. And we go now to Edie Heipel, political reporter for Catholic News Agency, who has been following this story. Edie, great to have you on.
It's great to be with you.
So let's talk a little bit more about Meloni. Obviously, her platform really resonated with people in Italy.
It does seem that it's resonated mostly because of the backlash you see, I think, in the mainstream media, which have come out strongly against her platform, calling it far right and even fascist. But, you know, you'll notice online, especially conservatives and many Americans and people across the country really have resonated with her platform, mostly because it's putting her faith central to her positions and basic common sense measures, such as putting your national interests first and protecting family, protecting life. So you've seen that even among people who don't necessarily view themselves as conservative, this message is resonating with people.
Absolutely. I mean, we definitely see that. They got the most votes. Let's talk a little bit more about her personally, her faith, and her stance on pro-life.
Sure. Well, Meloni calls herself a Catholic mother, and she would be the first female prime minister of the country, but she has, she's mentioned that she keeps a picture of St. Teresa of Calcutta on her desk, and she's a big admirer of John Paul II. And this really, you see her faith play out in her positions she takes. She's very strongly against same-sex marriage, for example, and has proposed policies to promote pro-life measures, such as supporting motherhood in the country. So all of this is really coming into play with the policies she's proposing, and frankly, it seems like they're popular in Italy because she's received so much of the vote.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of promoting motherhood, she did talk about how she wanted to bring up the birth rates in the country, which are some of the lowest in the world. It's something also Pope Francis has talked about.
Yes, Italy does have one of the lowest birth rates in the world, but on the flip side, they also have one of the highest rates of doctors who oppose performing abortions. But Meloni has said while she will not necessarily do anything to change the abortion laws, she wants to propose measures that will make it easier for mothers to have children and to bring the birth rate in the country up, which is something that she does really align with Pope Francis on.
I want to go back to some of the things you said about the the negativity that she's receiving, people calling her fascist, neo-fascist, comparing her to Mussolini. She also received some criticism, though, for her stance on immigration. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, Meloni has come out very hard against illegal immigration. She's proposed, for example, naval blockades to prevent illegal immigrants from coming into the country. She's also very skeptical of the European Union. But while she's proposed measures that are, making people come out and say that she's a fascist or anti-immigrant, she's also pushing to say, well, no, just wait a minute. I might be skeptical or propose these measures, but that's because I want to put my country's interests at heart. So I'm not going to leave the European Union. I'm not going to necessarily be, anti those measures, but I want to do what's best for my country.
Yeah, and she's not the first female prime minister of Italy just yet. Explain that to us.
Yes. So Italy's electoral process is pretty complicated, but basically it's made up of parties who run against each other but have to form coalitions in order to win. So the winning coalition which is made up of multiple parties, will eventually go on to govern. So while her coalition, her party rather, won most of the vote, now it's up to the president to nominate who will be the next prime minister. And obviously, most likely, that's going to be Meloni. But that'll take a couple of weeks to confirm before she goes on to actually become the prime minister.
And before we wrap up, before I let you go, I want to talk about another story that I know that you've been watching and writing about very closely, and that is what's happened happened in the Philadelphia area for a pro-life activist, a Catholic father of 7, when they got that knock on the door in the FBI. Let's talk about that.
Yes. Well, my colleague Joe Bakuris, too, has really reported and followed this closely. But basically, what we know as of yesterday, as Joe reported yesterday, he pleaded not guilty. The FBI showed up to his home and raided his home in front of his children, in front of his wife in the early hours of the morning for what was alleged to be a conflict outside of Planned Parenthood with a Planned Parenthood escort. You know, I think many Americans, pro-life Americans, Catholic Americans, and frankly just normal Americans are worried about how the FBI has been overstepping its hand here in this case, and also, you know, not coming out against the violence across the country against pro-life centers. So, you know, we're following this story closely and hoping that justice is done in this incident, but it is very concerning.
Absolutely, it is. I wish we had more time, so a lot more we can talk about. But Edie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.